even approaching him. But I don't take responsibility for the idea that I was incapacitated, and he honed in on that. And my friend said I was trying to work that out right there in the room, and my friend went ahead and said, oh, and by the way, too, I only had 1 day paid for at the hotel, and then I was told I was on my own, and I had no place to stay. And so then this guy was saying, well, you could stay with me since I'd met him. So it was kind of another thing where I had no place. I mean, there were plenty of times where I had no place to go, and nobody tried anything, and I wasn't interested in anything. And this was more of a situation where I was locked out of something, or forced to move in with somebody, and there was alcohol involved, and it was an incapacitation scenario again, which was becoming altogether too frequent with federal employees. So I remembered that when I told him, I said, my friend said that he would help bail me out, or he's putting something or other to make sure I don't go to jail. And he had come up with the money or the different security that was needed to show that I could be released. And when I told him this, I remember that Chris Rizzolo's face fell, like he was like totally disappointed. And I was like, he is really bummed out that I'm not going to jail. And then he was kind of mad about it. And it wasn't like he was, this friend of mine, he already knew that he was married. It wasn't like he was jealous. It wasn't like he was jealous of another man. He was really he was upset with the idea. It was like his high, that he kind of got on a high with the idea of my going to jail, and then he dropped down to a real low when he realized that somebody's going to bail me out at the last minute. And that was definitely when I knew that this person is not my friend, and he is an enemy to me. And any enemy of mine is also an enemy of my son. After that, when he left, basically when I wasn't going to jail, I then was trying to still find a place to live, and I had to go to a resource place, and I guess I got assistance again, or I went to a church, and someone gave me another couple of nights at that hotel. And while I was there at the hotel, after having been there with this other person, who told me he was Catholic, but I thought he was Jewish, then I was in this other hotel room, and I was being basically burned alive. It was the first time that I had anything weird happen to me, and it was after I was with this Chris Rizzolo. And it was kind of like, at that point, everything in Wenatchee went downhill. I was then, from that point forward, I was being tortured pretty much every day. And it was the first time that I ever was being tortured to my chest area with a really horrible burning sensation. And I remember that there was a man staying underneath my apartment. I didn't know if it was coming from there. I didn't know if it was coming from outside. I didn't know that I had a metal stent put into my chest area when I was in Maryland, and that someone could have figured out how to do something with that. I remember that another individual then moved into a room kind of across from me, and he was from Brooklyn. And I remember I left my place because I was basically being burned alive with my chest area and everything. Something really weird was happening. It was typically when I was in front of my computer, my little laptop, but I didn't know what exactly was causing it. And I went outside, and this guy from Brooklyn, New York, who kind of, I thought maybe was Jewish too, he was out there and watching me, and then he bought me a sub, and he bought it all mixed, and he bought it mixed, like mixed meats, after after I had just had a conversation with this guy, Chris Rizzolo, about what kind of subs do I like, and mixed meats, or how I didn't like this or that, and that kind of thing. And I don't know, I guess the only other person that I ever had a mixed meat sub conversation with was on the East Coast as well, was in Livingston, New Jersey, when I worked for the Kargman family. I worked for a man named Ken Kargman. He was Jewish, and he made fun of me when I got a sub at a deli, because he said nobody puts all of that different stuff on a deli. He was embarrassed to order it for me because it was a Jewish deli, and I guess you're not supposed to have salami and roast beef and then all of these different vegetables and oil and vinegar and all those things on it. Basically, you just get like one kind of meat, and and if you have meat, you don't add cheese with it. Like, you don't get roast beef and cheddar together, because the people who followed these Jewish laws or whatever, they don't have, there's something about not having a symbol of not having the meat of an animal next to the mother's milk, i.e. the cheese. So you don't put cheese and beef together. You don't store it together in the fridge that way. You can have cheese and you can have meat, but you have to put them in separate sections of the refrigerator. And you definitely don't order subs with salami and roast beef and cheese and every vegetable under the sun, and some salt and pepper, some chili peppers, and some oil and some vinegar. But anyway, so I really was not sure why this man from Brooklyn, New York, was there, and why he was there kind of observing me when I was getting burned, basically alive, for the first time since I had been assaulted when I lived with those 3 people, but nobody had really, and then in Seattle, a couple of things had happened, but in Wenatchee, nothing had been done to me except for when I lived with those guys in that one room the one night, a couple times. So it was kind of weird. It was like somebody got some sort of a permit or authority to, from that point forward, to assault me with full-blown torture. And then the person who was living right underneath me, he left his room one day, and he looked back at me and said, he was wearing a long-sleeved solid black shirt like Chris Dabney wears to work at the Post Pub. And nobody in Wenatchee wears something like that. But he was wearing the exact same thing that Chris Dabney wears to work. And then he looked back at me and he said really sarcastically, he said, when I was leaving my place, he said, so you cooling down? And then he said something about how it was getting really hot, wasn't it? And then he smirked and laughed and then walked off. And I was like, this guy knows that I'm being burned, and he's like right underneath my apartment. And then there's this Brooklyn man who wasn't underneath my apartment, but kind of across from mine apartment. And I was just being tortured. And I thought, because I hadn't had any that kind of torture ever happen to me before, I thought that it was because Chris Rizzolo had done something to my laptop. So I thought, since it was always happening when I was sitting in front of my laptop after I left, after I had parted with him, I thought that he had, maybe when I was in the shower or something, or in a room with the door closed, had done something and gone inside my laptop and done something with it. I didn't know. And then much later, I was told that I had a metal stent put into my chest area, which would mean that it would be easier for someone to somehow facilitate to that and do something to me. that would cause that kind of sensation in my heart, around my chest area. I mean, it wasn't heartburn. You know, it's like, I don't have digestive problems, and it wasn't heartburn. It was like vibrating sensation in my chest, and I was burning. It was like burning up. And then sometimes, a lot of times, my laptop, since it was right next to me, it was overacting too. But it's possibly that it was aerospace defense technology that just happened to affect my laptop and some kind of metal in my chest at the same time. I don't know. And then it got kind of weird, because then when I didn't see Chris anymore after that, Chris Rizzolo, I then went to the Wenatchee courthouse, and I had a police guard there, giving me razors, like putting razors back into my hands. I mean, he took a couple of, I had, razors that you shave with. I had to take those out of my bag because they were in my bag. It had all my belongings when I went to the courthouse, so he took them. But then when he gave them back to me, he gave me back some extra razors, and they were like razors that you would just cut with, not razors that you shave with. For example, not a leg razor, but kind of like a box cutting razor. And then I was kind of being told, I don't remember exactly what he said, but it was like a warning to keep my mouth shut. And it was some sort of a warning about Chris Rizzolo. And I thought, why are these police... First, the police are acting like they know that I'm with him and they're happy about it because he's connected to them. And then I thought, and so then why am I being threatened by people who work in this justice kind of department to keep quiet about him? And after that, he was still in the area, and after that, I was then going to a women's shelter. Because I couldn't stay at this hotel forever. I was being burned, as I say, at the hotel as long as I was there as well, after I was with Chris Rizzolo. So then I went to the YWCA, which is like the YMCA Women's Shelter in Wenatchee. And I was actually tortured there as well. And the women there, the two staff persons working there, were not good people. And one of them was from Seattle, just like Chris Rizzolo. And I believe that Chris Rizzolo knew her. Her name was Jill. And I need to take a quick break.